Hey, I'm RILEY CLEMMONS, and I'm on the Nebula Music Podcast.
Okay, what is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here once again, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. Many of you already know what this is all about, but in case you're joining us for the first time, this is a podcast where we talk to some of today's most inspiring and influential musicians, entrepreneurs, artists, anyone who's doing cool things in the music industry. We take a moment to explore their brain for a little bit, and hopefully that we can learn something new and just get to know them a little bit. Today, I'm super excited because I have a very talented artist, composer, musician, producer, all of the above, someone who's incredibly busy and makes amazing music and has such a gorgeous voice. And I'm super excited that I get a chance to sit down with Miss RILEY CLEMMONS today. RILEY, how are you?
Well, hello. That was a really incredible intro. So I'm doing better now. That's amazing.
I'm known for good intros. I like to build people up because, and I say this in a very positive way, I don't mean it in a rude way, but I don't have people who I don't think are cool on the show. So if you're on the show, it means that I think you're doing really cool stuff. So I mean that intro. It's well deserved because you do a lot. And I mean, you were just letting me know that you were in LA. For those of you who might not know, RILEY, you are based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but you are currently you going back and forth between Tennessee and LA to shoot videos and stuff like that. I'm curious, how has 2021 been for you? Because it's been a bizarre couple of months since last year to now. I'm curious, how are you doing overall? Are you good? Are you maybe a little bit drained? I don't know. I'm wondering.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's so funny because we've heard the term unprecedented times until we want to absolutely just never hear it again. But I will say that coming out of a year like 2020 and, slowly building back up to events and filming and new music and putting out a record and all these things, it's definitely felt like 0 to 100 in a lot of ways, but it's been really great, really busy, and for that I'm just super grateful because I think people are ready for that kind of content and music and all that good stuff. So it's been good. I'm tired, but in a good way. It's a good tired.
Yeah, especially once you've had a lot of downtime. I imagine that being busy in a good way is probably good. I'm curious, were you pretty much just relaxing throughout the past year, or were you maybe a hybrid, working on new things and maybe taking a break? I know a lot of people decided to take a break. Some people used the past year to get very creative, or somewhere in between. But for you, what was it like for you? I'm curious.
So in 2020, I did, of course, I took time off from touring like the rest of the entertainment industry and the traveling aspect. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The traveling aspect of my job, my career definitely shifted. And because of that, it just made room for more time to have downtime and have family dinners and do all of that super normal kind of thing. But I would say that it wasn't chill, or it wasn't chill in that kind of way, because I did finish a record and write majority of the songs that were on it in the year of 2020 through Zoom sessions or in the studio in my basement or just whatever. I was constantly working and creating, which was a really good outlet for me.
Yeah. Was that at all? And I don't mean to say it this way, but I've talked to several people where they were saying how over the past year they've been working on new music and finished albums and whatnot. And at some point, some people, not everybody, but some people felt a little drained over, just having too much time, which is bizarre. You know what I mean? For a creative person, sometimes having a lot of time on your hand when you're used to doing other things can be draining. So some of them found other outlets, maybe other interests that they didn't have time to do before. Like you were mentioning family dinners and things like that. Did you find yourself gravitating towards other things when you took breaks from doing music or any of that sort because of, how much downtime there's been?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, in my personal work life, aren't we all just trying to find like that beautiful balance of a healthy personal work life? But when I am creative, when I'm writing, there is not a piece of who I am in my soul that I don't, actively try to put into what I'm doing or creating. And so I found over the past couple of years that it's really important for me to be intentional about the time that I do take to rest from creating, because I do think that creative rest is crucial. I think you have to allow time for yourself to feel rested and feel creatively inspired. And so I definitely found myself, because I did have all this time.
Yeah.
And I'm an ambitious person, so I'm naturally thinking, well, I could write a song every single day.
Ooh.
And that's not really a healthy thing. So I definitely found myself being intentional about my time off, and doing things like playing sports and cooking and, so many different types of hobbies. I painted a lot. It was definitely a time to try new things and be creative in different ways.
Yeah. Are you a painter, like outside of writing music and things like that?
No, that's the thing. It's actually quite funny. I'm looking at it right now. I'm sitting in the chaise lounge in my bedroom, and above my bed, there's this huge canvas that's hanging. And I painted it over quarantine, which is so crazy. Found some random paints in the house, decided I wanted to be creative. So I tell everybody it's like an Italian Renaissance festival at my house for like a solid month, because my entire family is in one spot. We're all outside painting and listening to music and listening to a lot of Bee Gees or a lot of Frank Sinatra or a lot of bossa nova, and we're painting and we're hanging out, and where we found a bunch of old pieces of canvas or art that no longer really went with the style, or we weren't using them, and we would just paint over them. So it was a really fun time of trying new things.
That's good for you. It's interesting because I resonated when you said painting, because that's something that I just picked up. Now, I have been a sketch artist for since I was a kid, with pencils and stuff. But over the quarantine, I have this iPad Pro, which has like a drawing app on it. And to cut the short, I always wanted to be able to paint like Bob Ross, but I never, ever could. I never could get the handle of the paintbrush. But somehow over the quarantine, I picked up this iPad, and I have a knack, I have a knack for digital painting. It's the weirdest thing. I'll send you a picture of what I made, when we're done with this. But you'll be surprised. Like, I looked at it when I was done, and I don't know, to me, I was like, whoa, this is really cool, which is so fascinating that this whole downtime kind of led to this new interest sparking out in my life. I'm wondering for you, and if I get too personal, definitely let me know. But I know that for me, for example, I got a little bit closer with my family because of this downtime. You sound like someone who has always been close with your family, but I know that sometimes with working on music and touring a lot and this whole lifestyle of entertainment, it can take a lot of time away from what the average person would say is a healthy balance with family. I'm wondering for you, was that an issue before, quarantine, where you might have been spending too much time on work, and then maybe now you feel like you found a much easier time to be, to spend time with family and friends and then working? Or has that never been an issue and it never will be? I don't know.
That's a great question. And I do think that's something that's so important to talk about, because, we live in a society, a culture that is so focused.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. And I think it's a blessing, because my work, what I get to wake up and do every day, is my passion. So it makes me happy, and I'm excited to do it, and I want to pour my time and energy into it. And I'm ready for the next thing, all the time, which is great. But I think that I grew up in Nashville, really, really close with my family. I'm still really, really close with my family. And I think that, having the time over the course of 2020, just to have special family time, we all realized, Lord willing, next year's not going to be like this. So let's enjoy it. Let's be together. And then I think, being on the road, I just cherish the time that I do get to be home and be with my family and friends even more. So I think it's a really healthy balance. And, I think that, being away on the road makes you appreciate being home, and vice versa. So just trying to find joy in the moment and in whatever season of life presents itself.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you see the importance of that. If you don't mind, let's chime in a little bit into your backstory a little bit, because like I love talking about family, and I love talking about the environment that we grow up in, because it has a lot to do with what we end up doing in life. And with you have such beautiful music and you have a great work ethic that I feel like it would be fascinating to find out where a lot of it came from. I imagine you were probably born with it, to be honest, but I don't know. Like, I feel like I would love to know a little bit more about what it was like growing up, where you grew up, you know, how, if your family supported you all the way, that sort of thing. So maybe, I don't know, where does this start?
So it starts born and raised in the beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, some of my earliest memories were making lemonade stands or selling ring pops outside on our very suburban street in Nashville and watching tour buses come in and out of the neighborhood. And That was really normal. Like that was, I think, growing up in a music city normalizes the idea that people wake up and do music for a living. And, you know, my earliest exposure to music was my mom singing in the choir at church. There was this amazing, invigorating Southern gospel music that really built my love for vocals and passion and purpose embedded within lyrics. And I really fell in love with that. So I think it was this massive mixture of watching everybody in my family be a fan of music, love music, growing up in a city where music was such an integral part of how the city moved and breathed, and it was really beautiful to see. So I think in that way, even from a young age, I was naturally very drawn to music. I was constantly singing and performing, and you know, there was never really anything else that I was actively wanting to do. And I was lucky enough to have two parents who believed in me and nurtured the talent and nurtured the desire. And because of that, it never felt like something that was taboo or not realistic to chase. So yeah, and it led me here. I always had a really good support system.
Good for you, and congrats on your parents too. I'm not sure if they're there, but you know, I got to give them props, because anytime there's a good family story, I understand how important it is. Here's an interesting thought, because I had this conversation with somebody else from out in LA, and I have a very similar story to you, but it's slightly different because, you know, I'm from Los Angeles, California. You're from Tennessee, both music towns, both entertainment hubs, but in a different way. And for me, it was a much different exposure to music. But here's the interesting side that I had a conversation with somebody else. They also grew up with a family who was very much supportive in the music side of things, but they argued that their family was a little bit too pushy. You know what I mean? Like a little too, like, this is what you got to do, take this opportunity. And it made them not want to do it for a little while, until later on in their life, they came to terms with that's what they wanted to do. And so they did it. Obviously it sounds like in your family, you had a very healthy balance, but I'm wondering, in your experience, because you're relatively young, but you know the industry, you've been doing really, really well with your music. Do you see that a lot in, I don't want to say just like Nashville, because I know it's a different culture, but I'm going to give you an example here in LA, because it's an entertainment town. If you're here to do entertainment, even families, it's like, it's part of the culture. You know, they raise their kids, they put them in acting school, they do that stuff like early on, and it's like a machine. Let's just be honest, it's a machine, right? Yeah. But I'm curious, in your environment that you grew up in, did you see that a lot? Maybe not in your family, but maybe around you. Did you feel like that singer-songwriting town, were people being pushed to do that? Or was it not that? Maybe people just naturally are allowed to come to that conclusion on their own?
Genuinely, I'm looking back and thinking about it, because I really have never thought about this, because it was just so, I feel like Nashville, you know, you definitely get some of that, I'm sure. But honestly, growing up, I didn't see a ton of it. I think that it was just really natural to, you know, gravitate towards groups of people and friends that were creative and had their passions, whether it was creating music or acting or playing an instrument or art or sports, whatever it was. But honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of stage mom, for lack of better terminology, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Interesting. It's funny because I had somebody else on the show, and they were talking about pageants, for example. They're also from Tennessee, and they were talking about like that culture of having a family that's like really, really involved early on. And I don't know why this fascinates me. It's just such an interesting, different dynamic. But again, for me, when I hear your music and I see what you've been doing, you just seem to have adapted so quickly. You are doing it really, really well right off the back. I guess my question is, how young were you when you really started pursuing this professionally? And then maybe was it something that you had to adapt to right away, or did you feel like you just naturally you were born to be the songwriter and everything just fell into place? It just made sense to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I would say, great question. Everybody's story is different. So I always find it fascinating to hear people's answer to a question like this. But I met my manager very accidentally when I was about to turn 13. So I was really young. It was at a choir concert in the middle of Nashville. It was a Christmas choir concert. I had a little solo, and I took that solo to town because, what else do you do when you love to sing and your outlet is the middle school choir concert? And so my manager there, and then it was one of those things where I started working. Yeah, I was 13, and obviously he saw something in me. He's still my manager to this day, so it's a very beautiful partnership. But he started booking me for sessions in Nashville because I had this love of writing and creating music. It had always been part of who I am. I was writing songs in the back of the car when I was a kid on road trips, like always wanting to create, always wanting to do something along those lines. And so started co-writing in Nashville from the age 13 to close to 18, 19, I want to say. I was just in and out of studios. I would go to school, be in school all day. I got permission during my study hall to do a work study and go write and go learn this craft. And so I was writing with some of the best writers in Nashville, and was really learning what it meant to sit in a room and craft a song and be a lyricist and find melodies and how to communicate in a writing session. And it was just this learning process. And for years and years and years, my music never saw the light of day. I was just learning. And I'm really grateful for that experience and that time, because it did, there's a certain discipline that it breeds to be able to learn the industry without actively putting out music and being a part of it. Because my honest opinion is that nobody is built for the music industry. It's just it's tough. It's a tough industry. I just don't believe it to ever be an easy thing for anybody. So I think that's when the love of creating and the love of putting in the work becomes so important.
Yeah, if you don't mind me, sidestepping here a little bit, or not sidestepping, but asking you about that, what specifically do you feel makes the music industry not a natural thing to do? Because I agree with you, but I feel like it's more of a feeling than a thought, and I never really stopped to think about it, but you did bring it up, and I don't know if you ever thought about it either, but in your experience, and you do have a very interesting upbringing, that you saw this from a very young age. What in your experience makes you feel like it's just not a natural thing for most people to do?
I think for creatives, where the love is built into the creation of music or the performance of music and all of these things, I think any time that you watch a business become so near to it, it is something that you really have to guard yourself, and you have to guard the passion and the love for it. And so I think that, you have to be tough to be in this industry. And I think that looking back now, what would I have told my 13-year-old self is, do what makes you joyful, create the music that makes you proud, and take absolutely nothing personally ever, because everybody's path is different. And it's just the kind of industry where you can't exist in a place where you take things personally. And I believe that to be true.
Yeah, and that is a very, very wise observation. As this young 13-year-old who was given an opportunity, a very rare opportunity to develop in this industry, because you started doing writing sessions and things very, very young. Such an interesting opportunity that I'm glad that you ran with, because I don't know, I don't know how many people get the opportunity to watch that. I think a lot of songwriters, and I could be wrong, I don't have any statistics in front of me, but this is just a guess, and I feel like you might echo this too. I feel like a lot of songwriters, when they start, they're at least like maybe 18, maybe 19, maybe in their 20s. I would say that's probably the age group where people start, quote unquote, songwriting professionally. But you were very, very young when you started, and so you got this opportunity to grow up and develop, seeing all these things. Was there an experience that you had where you saw this taking place, where you might have seen creativity not necessarily being as free? And do you feel like that helped make you stronger, or maybe not, and maybe you had to learn how to build that confidence back up? I'm not sure if that makes sense what I'm asking, but I feel like you have a very unique perspective that not many people have, and I'm just wondering what that was like.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that, again, there's this fine balance between being a part of a business and being part of an industry, but also being a creative who wants to create music and stories and lyrics that, that live in a place of true authenticity. And I think with that being said, you learn this balance because it is also important that you're aware of the business and elements of the business and what it means to be commercial and what it means for, XYZ. And I think that, at least for me, there was definitely a process of you see quickly that sometimes the creativity that's the soul of what you're doing gets buried underneath. And I think because of that, you have to be hyper aware and be willing to fight for it and be willing to find new ways to bring that creativity to the center of everything that you're doing in a way that is approachable by an industry that, it's easy to get lost in.
Yeah, and that is a very, very good observation. Here's one thing that I'm curious about, because you're right. I mean, I've been around it for a very long time too. I may not be a songwriter, but different facets of the music industry, you see it everywhere. No matter what you're trying to do, there's a difference between it being commercially viable and then, somewhere in between, and then just completely off the deep end, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that's so fascinating, at least from the West Coast perspective, and I'm not speaking for everybody, this is just my observations, but a lot of people, when they think of pop music, or they think of country music, or they think even of hip hop, they think of formulas. They think that, a lot of music follows structures, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, whatever. And that's the same for a lot of music that's catchy, a lot of music you remember. Formulas tend to be more or less similar. In your experience, a lot of these legendary songwriters that you learned under, and even yourself now, I'm curious, how does someone fight for their creativity and for what they want to say and find a way to mold it into these formulas? Because these formulas work. I'm not going to say there's a formula, but, there's structures that work. And I guess in your experience, did you feel like those formulas were very much ingrained, like it needs to be this way, and find what you need to say as long as it fits in this format? Or is there more leeway now for people to experiment with whatever they want? I don't know, but I guess I'm curious how that was like, learning how to put what you want to say and then confine it into these formulas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think it all comes back to this idea, and I can't remember who told me this, but it definitely became a very central school of thought for me. But this whole idea of be aware of the rules so that you can break them well. And, I think you can look at it look at a house, people know how to build houses so that they won't fall down. Because that's important. You don't want your house to fall down. And, that's kind of the structural integrity, right? But also every house looks different for a reason, because the architect's eye is different. So I do think it all comes down to this idea of be aware of the rules so that you know how to break them in a way that is authentic to you. because music wouldn't be music if it were purely formulaic. Like there's
Right.
there's no way. But I do think that even looking back at songs from the Beatles and Fleetwood Mac and dating back to Aretha Franklin, I feel like they were aware of this formula. They were aware of this thing that worked, but I don't think that was at the soul of what they were doing. I think they were aware of the formula to some degree and broke the formula because of their creativity, because their architectural eye, for lack of better terminology.
Interesting. That's great examples, by the way. Great examples of brilliant songwriters and musicians who understood how to make things so different, even though they kept it in a similar format. This is a completely hypothetical question, but do you feel like the ability to break the rules after you've learned them, is that a talent in itself, or is that something that can naturally be obtained? And the reason why I ask this is because when I studied music, I come from, I had the opportunity to study jazz, but also to study commercial music and all that. And one thing I noticed in my career, a lot of the people that studied jazz and got very deep into what we're calling the rules of music. Jazz is very intricate, same with like classical music. Very often, not always, but very often, a lot of the people that study these rules and understand them, they get stuck in them because it gets very hard to get away from it once you understand how everything works. In your opinion, because I believe what you're saying is true, especially with all the examples you gave, is that a talent in itself, being able to take the rules, understand them, and then break away from them and be like, all right, now I can do whatever I want? Does that make sense?
1,000%. It has to be talent-based because it's hard to do. It is so hard to walk in. I mean, and that's the thing. I feel like, yes, there's this natural instinct to be a writer and create what you're proud of. And that's the blessing, right? That's the fun part of it. That's the part that is so amazing. But, it's when you start writing and creating all the time, you definitely are aware that you're not going to walk in and every session you have isn't going to be magical and inspiring and make you feel like the greatest writer. And I think that's where the talent part comes in, of having to be aware of, how to break yourself from writer's block, or how to create something that will be effective but still you. And I think that's the whole talent of it, right? Is that tenacity to dig around until you find what feels right.
Yeah. Was this something that you were actively told to do, or did you just see it being done by some of your mentors?
I don't think anybody actively ever told me that was the thing to do. But looking back now, I think that it was like a natural learning process of just trying things that didn't work, seeing what did work, and then being able to find my unique way of doing it.
Nice. I love that. And I thank you so much for being honest, because I feel like it's such an interesting topic that, I don't know, I feel like it needs to be talked about a little bit more. But the fact that you have this experience that's so close to it, and, you learned from it, and then you became independent from it, in your own creative experience, I think it's such a unique I don't know, it's just such a unique story. But then, you started being a songwriter, you started learning from the greats, and then at some point you decided that you wanted to perform. The interesting part of it, or the thing that interests me, is I'm wondering, was the performance side of it all, making your own music? I know that as a songwriter and as a musician myself, we all make music. We all make things that we want to put out or whatever. But I feel like the actual action of becoming an artist is a huge step that a lot of people never get to. And for you specifically, I'm wondering how that happened. Was it organically? Was that always the plan? I mean, I don't know. You were 13 when you started writing and stuff, so maybe it was your plan, maybe it wasn't, but I'm curious how it happened for you.
The passion was always rooted in the creative process and making music, but another massive passion of mine was, was performing and being up on stage and moving and giving a show. And that was always a passion. I mean, I grew up in theater. I grew up constantly wanting to be on stage and in dance classes and wanting to sing. And so it was a really natural progression to want to be an artist and to want to be the person that got to tell the stories from stage.
Was it intimidating at all when you started putting out music? Because you've probably worked with a lot of great people, a lot of great songwriters, and you probably were in rooms with a lot of great performers too. I don't know. Like if that were me, I feel like I would be a little bit self-conscious, especially if I'm putting out my own stuff. But again, you seem to have been able just to take life by the horns. You know, I'm not stealing that from Dodge, but I'm just curious for you. Was it intimidating at any point that you branched off and you were like, hey, I want to put out my own stuff. I want to tell the stories, especially coming from that songwriting world?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I remember at a really early age being told in like a very matter of fact, beautiful way, like, Riley, there will always be somebody out there who's going to be better than you. So if you're doing it because you want to be the very best at it and you think you're the best at it, then that's the wrong reason to do it. You know, because there is going to be somebody better than you. I think it's about what you uniquely can bring to the table. That is the superpower, is finding what you do and what nobody else does like you, and then letting that be the driving force of everything. So yeah, I mean, you look around, there are always going to be people better than you. There are always going to be people that have, you know, more staging or lights or the song that's the song of the moment, you know. And yeah, I do believe that it all comes down to staying authentically who you are and letting that be the passionate force. And you know, that's a hard lesson to learn, and I'm still very much in the midst of it, but I do believe it's important.
Yeah. Random hypothetical question. Is there anybody out there who probably is the best? I've heard that phrase so many times in my life. Like, there's always someone who's better than you. In my mind, I'm like, well, who's the absolute best?
Who's the best? Oh, gosh. Aretha.
Oh, great choice. A great choice.
I'm a big Aretha fan, so she can have it. Let's take it, Aretha.
Well, Aretha, this one's for you. You've clearly have been crowned the best, because I'm obliged to agree with you. You know, what's one thing I was reading the other day, which I found very fascinating, was this idea that every creative person in any industry, not just music, but every industry, has this moment where not only do they have to come to the point where they realize that they're good enough to say something or to do something, but then there's a moment where they have to also overcome this doubt of, you know, will anyone even listen? Will anyone ever even find what I'm doing or whatever? Because it can be intimidating to see around you, and not only see good people doing it, but seeing all these communities around you. Is there enough room for me? That's basically the question that everybody has. And obviously the answer is yes, but being able to get to that point sometimes can be difficult. Again, kind of branching off what we were talking about before, but was that something that also took you a minute to figure out, or did you never even care? Did you never even think about it? You just decided to go for it?
Oh gosh, of course I cared. Of course I cared. I think when I started writing and creating, I was probably at an age where, you know, I didn't have a backup plan. I still don't have I've never had a backup plan, but it was this whole thing of, well, yeah, of course I'm going to do this. I'm young, I'm passionate, I'm going to do it. And so I think that was a gift. I think as I got older is when it was, well, who cares what I'm going to say? But I think that like, I've never known a creative that didn't have that experience. And I think that's the motivator, you know, those moments of, well, who cares what I have to say, are the moments when it's like, okay, that's why you have to keep pushing, and that's why you have to keep creating, because you're always going to have that doubt to some extent, and being able to push through it is, I feel like, for me personally, when I've gotten the work I'm most proud of.
Nice. I love that. I love where your head's at, because it just seems like you know exactly where you want to go. Can I ask your age? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fair. I'm 21.
Yeah, you're very young, and you exactly know where you want to go, which is so cool. I wish I knew exactly where I wanted to go when I was 21. But you know what? We all do what we can. We get to where we need to go, and we do the best of it. What is it that you feel like you're trying to say with a lot of your music? I know that's a generic question, but when I hear you sing and I hear your music, I feel like there is this passion for certain themes. And I'm wondering, just from you specifically, what drives you when you're writing this music? What is it that I'm not sure if you're trying to say anything in particular, or if you have messages that you're trying to, like, you know, put out there, but is there like a theme that really drives you to make music and you're trying to talk about it?
Yeah, of course. I'm trying to create authentically. I'm just trying to show up and bring my stories to the table and tell them in a way that makes people feel connected and human. And at the end of the day, my biggest goal is just to give people hope. You know, that people need hope, and people need to know that they're less alone. And I think that the special part about music is that it intrinsically has this ability to make people feel less alone. And that's the whole point of it, right? So I just hope people, when they listen to my music, feel loved, feel seen, and feel like they're not alone.
Can I ask, and this might be a stupid question, but why specifically like making people not feel alone? Do you see that a lot in your life? Do you see a lot of people who are very much alone, who are hopeless in that way? Because it clearly drives you, but I'm just curious.
I mean, I think that if people were honest, all of the anxiety that we feel, all of the doubt, all of the nervousness, all of the ups and downs are rooted in this idea that when you feel things, you know, you're feeling them by yourself. Those feelings of, you know, being awake at night and having doubt or having anxiety all stems from loneliness, in my opinion. That's just what I've experienced and seen. And so I think that the more we can make topics like mental well-being and, you know, falling down and failure and getting back up less and less hard to talk about, the more I feel like I've done my job on this earth.
That's super important too, because I do feel like, I mean, I don't know what your opinions are on certain things, but do you feel like when it comes to like mental disability and a lot of those things, do you feel like there isn't enough being done right now to deal with a lot of those issues? And I don't know, if I definitely have gone through my doubts too, like what you're describing. And you know, what's funny when it comes to like loneliness and things like that, there's different ways to explain it, you know, being lonely or being alone with your thoughts and that sort of thing. But what's fascinating to me in particular in my life, I had to learn how to be okay with who I was, you know, just on my own in terms of like my brain and who I am inside of my head and stuff, which is something that I feel like there's a lot of content out there, but not really a lot of depth on how to deal with it because everyone's different. Anyways, I'm digressing. My point is, in your opinion, when it comes to music in particular, because that's what we're talking about, is there enough people out there talking about it? And is that why you're doing it? Or I don't know, but I don't know if that makes sense. I'm just genuinely curious if you feel like it's enough being done about it.
I think that in an optimistic point of view, there are more people talking about mental health than there ever have been on Earth, which is progress, right?
Right.
You know, people are talking about the hard things to talk about. And I think, you know, less than, well, there are not enough people doing it. It's more so, you know, I'm passionate about it and I want that to be something that my voice speaks on. You know, I think that it's important to be wise and cautious whenever you have a platform and you use your voice to talk about anything, you know? So that's something that I want to be intentional about using my voice for.
Yeah. Do you have, and I'm going to be very careful as I ask this, just because it's, you know, I don't have to include this in the episode, but do you have any experience with any like actual mental health things that have either happened in your family or to you in particular? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask, but sometimes I'm interested in knowing about that. It's important.
That should be something that is part of the conversation. That's the whole point. I have struggled with anxiety for many, many years. And I feel like that's something that, you know, something that people don't always want to talk about, but I've personally struggled with that and been on that journey of figuring out how to be healthy and how to take care of myself. And I've also seen people in my life struggling with problems from eating disorders to struggles with, you know, chemical imbalance in the brain and all of these things that are so important to talk about and have a conversation around. So, I just feel like it's not a shameful topic. There's most people in the world have some sort of struggle in that realm. So, yeah, that's absolutely something that I'm happy to talk about. And of course, so yeah, there's less stigma, the better.
Yes. Thank you so much for being open to talk about it. And I'm a huge proponent of being open to talk about it, but I like to respect people's privacy, you know, so I want to make sure that everyone is open, and I am always grateful when someone is open to talk about it. In your perspective or in your experience. Is anxiety something that you're actively dealing with still to this day, or was it something that just happened for a moment and it's gone?
No, of course. I mean, I still actively do struggle with anxiety. And it does, I mean, you can hear that reflected in my music, some of those feelings. And I think that it's this work in progress. And that's another beautiful thing about music, you know, writing down my experiences with that through music and how it makes me feel. And the goal is when people listen to that if they're walking through something similar, they'll be able to feel less alone.
When did you notice that you had anxiety? How old were you when you started like paying attention to that?
I grew up in a family where mental health was always talked about, which is really amazing. And I realized that, you know,
Good
lots
for
of
you.
families. Yeah, I know. It's a huge blessing. So I grew up where that was not something that we were, you know, told to keep quiet, or it was not a shameful thing. You know, therapy was always my house is super therapy positive. Mental health was a huge topic of conversation. And so, you know, starting from a young age, when I did notice certain feelings of anxiety, and as I got older, as that started to look different, you know, you go from anxiety with going to school to anxiety about work, and things change. So
Yeah.
I think that I was always really mentally aware of when I was feeling overwhelmed or anxious, and, you know, how to take care of myself and find time to rest and find people to talk to and all that good stuff.
So fascinating. You know, if you don't mind me sharing a little bit about my experience, I don't think I have ever suffered from anxiety, and I'm not going to pretend like I understand it. It's something that I actively learn about every day, more and more from people that are, you know, sharing their experiences like you. I had another guest on the show, Julia Gargano, an American Idol contestant finalist. She also suffers from anxiety, and just telling me all these experiences. And for me, for example, and hopefully I'm not getting too personal, but I remember I grew up very religious. I grew up Pentecostalist in LA. And in my community, I'm Hispanic, I'm Latin American. And, you know, in the Latin American world, people can be very, 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 very strictly devout to religious. And I'm talking about like more than what you would consider. And it is something that in my culture, I don't know about other cultures, but in Latin American culture, mental illness is not, there's no room for it, if I can be honest with you, especially in the religious side of things. It is considered, I don't know what it's considered. It's just considered like, oh, it's just in your head, get over it, right? That's the simplest way I can put it. And obviously it differs from person to person. But I distinctly remember seeing tons of people growing up that now that I'm an adult, I look back at it, I'm like, oh, wow, they were clearly suffering from what sounds like anxiety. Do you feel like, you know, as a country, we're moving forward? I know we said that there's a lot more content now, but in your experience, as you felt it and you are actively taking steps to make that happen, I don't know, I'm just generally curious what you think about that. Do you think that society in this country in particular is changing their mindset towards mental illness in general, or is it something that still needs to actively be worked on?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a big question, and it's an important one to have a conversation about. You know, I think that I grew up in church. I would say that more so than ever that I grew up in faith. You know, that was always a priority of my family, to have that faith, you know, in God, and to have a relationship that was personal and deep and meaningful. And I've heard many experiences about, you know, people that grew up in, you know, super quote religious, maybe less relational, meaningful conversations and relationships with God. I think that, you know, through that, it's sometimes hard when religion takes on the rules and restrictions of you can't talk about this, or this is not allowed or welcome. But I will say it's been a really beautiful experience as I've grown up to be able to, you know, walk with my faith, walk with God, find a relationship with Him, and, you know, really lean into what that heart says about mental wellness and mental illness, and how to make that a part of the conversation. And so I think also, as somebody who does love God and is a believer it's even more important to kind of show the heart about, you're not alone through the music, through that conversation, through the walk with mental wellness. And that's the goal, right? Again, to make people feel less alone. And I think that so much of religious culture, regardless of what religion it is, sometimes does put some stigma around it that might not be healthy, that probably isn't healthy. But I do think that, per my experience, my relationship with God and my faith has given me more permission and comfort than ever, and showing up with those types of struggles.
Thank you so much for being honest. Sometimes I know I've said this already, but it's true. It can be difficult to talk about things like that, and I do agree with you 100%. I'm wondering, is this journey that you're on, because, and I'm going to sidestep here, your music is 100% absolutely about hope, and I think it's beautifully done, and your voice over it, everything that you're doing with it, just speaks to this, this just hope and things getting better. In your personal journey, you are absolutely right how a lot of religious, and I don't want to put all religion into this bubble, but there's a lot of people out there, me speaking from my experience, who do use it as a way to not only control, but to, put people down, and especially if they're having mental illness or whatever. And then now all of a sudden you're not encouraging these people to find, solutions or whatever. But in your experience, you seem to be on a very healthy journey. How did that come to be? Did you happen to be in a very supportive religious environment? I'm not talking about just your family. Your family sounds amazing. My hat's off to them. But and sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you need a community, and if you're in a bad community, that can be a very bad thing. So my question for you, very simply, is this journey that you're currently on, was that something that you sort of achieved just on your own with your family, or maybe you are part of a really good supportive community that helped you along the way? I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, great question. Community is everything. I mean, I have always believed that it's faith over religion. That's always been where I've existed and been inspired by is my faith in this journey and this relational aspect of being in touch with God and what he says and what he thinks about, what I'm walking through personally. And so I think with that said, I was able to find a lot of friends, a lot of strong community who had really similar values and beliefs. And it showed up in a way that was this beautiful support system of talking about the hard things, being supportive through the highs and lows. And that changed my world. I think when you find friends and even co-creators, people I was writing with, were on the same page too, is this very special, beautiful, connective experience. And I think that's really important. Surround yourself with the people who encourage you on your journey, who encourage you on your walk of life. Find those people. And I think that changes everything. And that definitely allows even more light to be poured on a situation.
Good for you. Seriously, I'm super happy for you. I wish I had some of the understanding you had at your age. I'm only 30, but I know how much things can change in just a couple of years. And it's beautiful. It's always exciting to see when a young artist like you not only is making great music and stuff, but you're actively, living a very good life, and you're promoting healthy living, and I love that. I can always get on board with stuff like that, and so I congratulate you on your journey and on what you're doing, because it's all really, really cool. It's all really good, and I'm happy to hear that. And Riley, I'm beyond stoked for you. Thank you so much for being open today and just having an honest conversation. I know we're hitting that hour mark, so I don't know. You've been an absolute pleasure to talk to, Riley. And
thank you so much. Likewise, this has been lovely.
Yeah. Well, as we start to wind this down, why don't you let me know a little bit about what you got on your plate? I know you probably have some new music out. I know that things are starting to, fingers crossed, things are starting to go back to normal. So maybe you have some shows and stuff lined up. Just let me know a little bit. What do you have on your plate?
Yes, I'll be on tour this fall with the incomparable, wonderful Torrin Wells. He's so amazing. So we'll be out on the road together, hitting, I believe, 23 cities in the U.S. So it'll be a great way to dive back into touring.
Oof.
Yeah. I just put out a record last month. So the glitter is literally still falling off of this record. And I'm excited to play it and continue to get to share this music. So lots of fun stuff coming up, more content, more videos, more music, always more music. So yeah, I'm excited. Busy times, but good times.
Good for you. Working on any new music, or you're still just working on the album that you just released last month?
Oh gosh, I'm always working on new music. I'm writing currently. So
That's right. That's right.
Always
writing a song every day, huh?
Song a day.
I love it. Well, Riley, thank you so much. You've been an absolute pleasure. You're such a cool person. So thank you for being on the show. You're awesome.
I appreciate it, Eddie. This was awesome, and I hope you have a great day. I am so stoked that we got to do this.